Hi there, everybody. My name's Taren Preston. I'm Operations Manager at Warrina Domestic and Family Violence Specialist Services here in Coffs Harbour.
Hi, I'm Anna. I'm the manager of our North Coast Housing and Homelessness Services for St Vincent de Paul. So I oversee some drop-in centres along the coast for people experiencing or at risk of homelessness.
Hi everyone, I'm Isabelle. I'm the clinical psychologist at the Drug and Alcohol Service in Port Macquarie.
We'd love to welcome you today to the final session of today's Domestic and Family Violence Forum. This session is based around the 5th R, so around restoring yourself. We'd like to talk about a case study or a scenario that we've entitled that All Doors Are Closed. So this session is really around exploring what it's like as caseworkers in community when you are faced with a really complex presentation and you can't quite find the right service to meet the needs at that exact time, and how you work through that as a professional and as a service. So I'll start by reading the case scenario. It might feel that this is someone that's quite familiar. It's not based on a particular person, but more of a collective experience that I think will be quite familiar to a lot of us in the audience. A woman turns up at your service unexpectedly. She's a mum, but her kids aren't in her care anymore. She's had on and off contact with you for several years. She frequently presents in crisis, but you've never actually worked with her in more formal case management. Addiction is present for her. She uses ice. Over the years, she's had admissions to the mental health unit. She's been in unstable accommodation for over 5 years after she lost her home following domestic and family violence. She was evicted from a social housing property, but most recently she's been sleeping rough. She tells you that she was physically and sexually assaulted last night, and you can see the bruises. She cannot go to the police because she doesn't think she will be believed. You're aware that she's been arrested in the past when she's called the police for support during an assault. She was misidentified as the perpetrator rather than the victim, so she doesn't trust them. Also, calling the police could put her at risk as she could be accused as being an informant by others she knows in the community. She lets you know that she's used today, as this is the way that she manages the trauma symptoms that she's experienced. This is due to her experience of childhood abuse in care. She can't stay clean at the moment, as she can't handle detoxing without a safe home and all the stuff going on around her. Her speech is pressured. She disclosed that she's feeling paranoid, and she indicates that she might be a victim of a larger conspiracy involving law enforcement and DCJ. She'll not go to ED under any circumstances, and she specifically asks you not to call an ambulance. The main problem she's looking at today is housing. She needs a roof tonight. You're aware that she's unable to access temporary accommodation as she's been banned from several local motels. She says she wants to go to the Women's and Children's Refuge. You call them, but they can't place her at the refuge, but they do offer to allocate an outreach worker. They're also aware of the client's history. She and the kids are known to them from when DCJ first became involved. On hearing that she can't come to the Women's and Children's Refuge, the client says, "What's the point? No one ever helps me," and goes to get up to leave. So the main purpose of this discussion that we're going to talk about is to explore how we as a sector and as community partners work together over the long terms with clients when there are many issues impacting and there's not an obvious quick fix or service that meets the needs by themselves. So I'll hand over to Anna.
Yeah, so as Taren said, I think this case study is probably familiar to many of us, and that feeling of what are we going to do in this situation. So I guess I'm going to ask the question, what comes to mind for you two when you hear this case study, and what sort of outcomes would you be looking for as workers?
So I will jump in and go first. I guess some of the things that come to mind for me is wanting to not get drawn into that sense of hopelessness that I know that the client would be feeling at that time, having gone through 5 years of sleeping rough and possibly not having good connections or good, trusting relationships with some of the services that she's been involved with. So wanting to just be mindful that can happen for us as clinicians, and wanting to sort of keep her engaged with us and see if we can keep the communication going and possibly re-establish a bit of the trust between at least this client and myself and the service that I work for.
I'll have an answer as well, if that's okay. I think what jumps out to me when I meet women in this type of a situation is just how compounding complex trauma can be. And I think one thing I really notice in these situations is that frequently women haven't learnt or have had that a sense of innate sense of rights to safety eroded from them, and having been left down by the system potentially over a number of years, it can be just so difficult to build trust and to see that people can work with you for the long term. So what I'd like to see for this client is that she was treated with dignity and respect and kindness, regardless of what the service outcome is. So sometimes in these cases, I think that's actually more important, to be kind and to be compassionate, rather than, I guess, rattling off a whole list of no's that you're going to get from the system.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we have the short-term sense of how do we create safety for her in this moment, and what does that look like for her? She's obviously got a lot of resilience because she's been experiencing crisis over the 5 years. So how can we draw on that resilience that she has, but create a place of safety for her in that moment, and do some safety planning for what does that look like for you, considering the options that are available right now. But in terms of outcomes, I think, those longer term goals of helping her create a sense of identity, helping her expand her networks of support in community, increasing her health and wellbeing in lots of different ways, that's not going to be an immediate outcome, but it's definitely something that we can work on over a longer period of time. Once we've given her the respect and validation for her situation and kind of keep that engagement with our services, we're able to focus on kind of some longer term goals.
Okay, we'll move on to the next question. So as a community sector, what values underpin effective collaboration when working with members of our community who are most vulnerable and difficult to engage?
I think for me, it's about, creating relationships with other services that are built on communication, good engagement with each other, but also some flexibility. When we're working with really vulnerable people, the standard methods of making appointments and scheduling times for them to come and engage with you, and then often hearing, oh, well, they're not engaging, so we're not working with them. I think that flexibility needs to be underpinning the way that we work with people. Where do they feel safe? Where do they feel connected to? Can we meet them in a way and in a space that feels safe to them? Can we as the workers kind of facilitate that collaboration in a way that works for them? So for us in our services, we have the soft engagement of people coming and utilising our space because we provide those basic needs of food and showers and a sense of home for people when they don't have a home. So we're really likely that other collaborators and community will come into this space to work with.
So I guess for me, I always try and operate from a perspective that services are doing the best that they can. So I try to get an understanding of what their policies and procedures are, what the organisational mission might be, how that fits with their funding, to understand the reasons for their decisions. Because often when you're kind of on this Friday at a 4 o'clock in a crisis, you don't have time to unpick the broader, ins and outs. You'll just hear, oh, we can't do that. And so I try to keep my frustrations out of that and accept that I do really believe that services and other people that I work with are doing the best they can. And if they could say yes, or if they had a solution, they would offer it. It's really, really exceptionally rare that I've interacted over my sort of 20-year career where I've met somebody who just says no for the hell of it. And in those situations, I think what you're usually seeing is burnout. So I really try and take the position that I trust the people I work with. Similar to Anna, I spend a lot of time trying to build relationships and getting to know people so that we can have that mutual transparency and flexibility. So even though we all get really frustrated by things that happen in the systems or in decisions that are outside of our control, I really find it helpful to hold true that the organisation is doing the best they can, and I really make an effort not to transfer any frustration that I might be feeling onto the client, because that also further severs the relationship that they need to have with the other service. So I don't speak down about other services to clients. I try and kind of do a bit of almost like interpretation or translation around what the decision might be. If I'm not sure, I'll ask and get clarification, just so that the client can also see that respectful relationship being modelled on how you navigate systems. So that's a part of, I think, the work that we can do as well, is show how to move through frustration proactively, because that's a really important skill that the clients need to have as well. So if they see us kind of throwing our hands up and going, we're done, then that doesn't necessarily send a good signal to the client that service is going to be able to help them out.
I can relate to that so much, actually, Taren, hearing you say that, because as clinicians working in drug and alcohol, we're often the ones that are doing the calling to the services like yours, trying to support our clients in getting their needs met. And we are, sort of often sitting there in the counselling room with them, throwing our hands up in the air and going, wouldn't it be great? And feeling frustrated and all those sorts of things. So I think that's a really valid point that you raised about sort of, I guess, modelling that sort of the ability to be able to still maintain a sense of calm and sense of trust, even though that my needs can't be met right now, or the things that I want can't be given to me right now. There can still be some, alternative solutions that can be found. Really. And I think that was kind of where I was going to come in with my response to that question, was just maintaining a sense of hopefulness that there can still be, something positive that can be found from, if service can't offer us exactly what we want, what can they offer to us, and how can we still get there, even if it can't be achieved right now today.
I think the people that we work with have very heightened sense of being able to sense authenticity and how people can. So when we really trust each other and work well together, that in turn creates a sense of trust for them with services outside of the immediate, which is really beneficial in the long term.
All right, we'll move on to the next question. If a client is mistrusting of your service, how do you repair this?
I guess I'll go first. It can be difficult. I think for our services, we have the privilege of time. We are not time limited in the ways that people engage with us. So we can really go at people's own pace. They can kind of walk into us and not even make eye contact if they don't want to, and just make a coffee, and we can go really slowly. But essentially, I think it's around consistency. We're treating everybody the same. You're always going to get the same approach from us and the same kind of response and engagement. It's validation of what happened. It's listening to them and making changes based on their feedback, and really being curious about what broke that trust and how we can kind of navigate repairing that. And I think, for us too, we get to let them see us engage with other clients, which in turn helps them see that we are, creating trust on a broader scale, and they can just sit back and watch that and slowly engage at their own time. But yeah, I think those trauma-informed principles of empowerment, choice, trust, collaboration, and just doing that repeatedly over time will slowly begin to repair the rupture.
Yeah, I think for me, what I'd say is that you need to be humble and listen. So I think this was particularly important in situations where you have done everything by the book, but you have to understand that even when you've done that, it still can be a devastating outcome for the client. And I think this case study kind of hints at that around what happens when there's kids involved. So in the DFV space, they talk about a dual lens when working with families. And so on one hand, that we're very focused on mum's story, but the other lens that we need to take is the experience and journey that the kids have been on and continue to be on, because their experience of the domestic and family violence is separate and unique to themselves. And we know that children are not just bystanders to the abuse in homes. We know that they're victims. And I guess the other thing that we know is that kids aren't just bystanders to mum's trauma and the trauma symptoms that continue after DFV and other significant assaults. And I think one thing that really is a heartbreaker in the DFV space and in other spaces is that that ongoing use of coercive control, abuse, power over, it just erodes mum's capacity, or can erode mum's capacity to be a mum. It chips at all of her identity, all the skills that she has. It draws away from her capacity to give time to her kids and to be there for her kids, because she is navigating a storm. So it's similar to in these cases, there are times where we're working with a family where there's really been a significant event or series of events happen in their life, but we need to make notifications to child protection. So the way that I guess we try and do that is we try and partner with the non-offending parents, or in this case with the mum, and make it really clear to DCJ that we're reporting on the behaviours of the person who's chosen to use violence. And we also, I guess, I would encourage other people to do this if they haven't thought about it, is if we're needing to report on things that have come from the trauma, like potentially, you know, the use of drugs as a way to cope with the trauma symptoms that they're experiencing, that you note that in the report to DCJ. So it's not just about reporting that mum is using, it's around saying mum is experiencing significant trauma, the coping mechanism that she can draw on just at this minute is this. So we're kind of always aligning with her and not kind of buying into a system that will see another devastation happen to the family. But it is one of those things that we all struggle with, that there will be times where the kids need the support. But I think that's also the motivation for me to work long term and to work on to play kind of the long game, is that I don't want to see another devastation happen to this family. So if we can all come together and really rally around the family, what we could avoid is another catastrophe of a removal and a breakup, which has its own set of adverse experiences that go along with that.
Sorry, Isabelle, you're on mute.
I'm on mute. Sorry, guys. Yeah, as you were both talking, I was thinking about, all of the points that you've raised, all those principles around how to rebuild trust with a client who's really, had some negative experiences when she's been engaged in services before, and just, even, other humans in her community before. And I think, you've absolutely hit the nail on the head in terms of, wanting to be humble and non-judgmental and be in it for the long haul. It's not about, you either trust me right now and we get this thing done, or that's it, you don't have another chance. It's not about that. It's about, I guess, demonstrating those behaviours consistently over time, and hopefully, that they are around long enough to have a chance to sort of notice that consistency, and then hopefully participate in it and engage with us. There's no rule around what is the exact right way to be, but I do think being gentle and being prepared to just take it on, take it easy, and absolutely being yourself as well. Just be genuine. Just be yourself, and I think that would show through. Yeah.
When you have to say no or hear no from a service partner, how do you navigate that? Why do you have to say no sometimes?
I can answer that. And I think one of the reasons that this particular group have come together, I think that our services represent people who have had to say no to each other in the past. So I guess for me, I guess I try to see it as it might not be today, but it might be another day. So sometimes with refuges and housing, that there's this strange formula of a twist of fate where we might happen to have a room available. Better yet, we might happen to have a transitional property available. And some of that is really by chance. There's other times where the client's particular presentation on that day would mean that it's going to be really difficult for us to support her in the refuge space. But that never means that it's not going to be tomorrow. And I think that what I've seen is that if we sit in the wings sometimes, so maybe we're not the agency that should lead just at this moment, but if we stay in the wings and we provide we come onto the team and we play the long game and we say this is going to be something we need to work on for a while, that's I've seen some really wonderful things happen. So sometimes people will ring us and say, I need to come into the refuge, and we say no, but we can allocate a caseworker. And I actually think that's great. So it's much better than bricks and mortar, because I've worked with lots of families where I could provide 100 houses if for some miracle I had 100 houses to provide them. But until we kind of support them on their journey of healing to be able to deal with the other stuff that's going on, it's not a bricks and mortar solution. So I could provide 100 houses in a perfect world, but we'd be 100 tenancies kind of in the wake that haven't quite worked out. So I think that's one of the things that's really that I really hold strong to, that even though at the 4 o'clock on a Friday you might have to go nah, it doesn't mean it's not another day. And I think that's why it's really important for services to keep working through, we can't do that today, but here's what we can offer. And particularly when it's very complex. So sometimes on the other end, we'll get a phone call from a partner in community, and they'll describe the case like that. And sometimes we know the client, or we've known them before, or sometimes we've never heard of them. And it sometimes can feel like for the caseworker on the other end of the phone that there's this automatic transfer of all the responsibility onto that one service. And that can be really overwhelming for the person on the other end of the phone. Go, whoa, we just met this person, but because there's such a pressure and a sense of urgency to make it happen, it can feel like it's our responsibility to fix it all, when in reality it takes a lifetime of hurt and harm sometimes to get to a situation like we started off discussing with the story that we opened with. So I think it's around maybe just adjusting our language, that we might have to say it's more, and probably what we've tried to get better at doing is to say, well, our assessment at the minute is that this is not the right service at this time, but this is what we're thinking. So even though we might be saying no to one particular element of our service, like a refuge or a transitional property or something like this, that's just one element of what we can provide. And in my experience, bricks and mortar it doesn't do anything unless you're backed up with someone who can walk with you on that journey of recovery, and that it's also just not one service that walks with a client. So I think it's more around how do we go, okay, here's where we're at. It feels urgent and like it's a rush right now, but actually this is actually a conversation for Monday morning, because she'll get through the weekend. She will. But us as a service, now we're all kind of invested in this story. We all need to come together outside of this urgency and crisis to, if the client wants us to, because that's the other things about consent, but if the client gives us permission to do that, then we come together as a service sector and go, okay, what are all our parts in this, and how do we, over the long term, support a client like the one that we were talking about earlier.
Is Anna still with us?
I'm still here.
Oh, good. You just went funny on my end. That's all right.
I think, yeah, I'd like to answer from the other side of that as well. We certainly are a service who hears no a lot, because we are working with quite complex clients. And I just want to acknowledge that from the casework or the workers side in that service who's hearing no, and you feel like there's this sense of urgency and you feel like someone's really unsafe, it can be almost devastating to hear that as the worker as well, and to understand in that moment, to accept in that moment that option is not going to work either. It is hard to hear that no. I think what Taren is saying is correct, though, that experience has showed us that a house for the night is not going to solve the longer term issues. A room for that night is not going to essentially solve anything longer term. It's about understanding that option A was a no, but we still have option B, C, D, E ongoing, and ways to wrap around this person and support them, and offer all sorts of a variety of wraparound support that will have longer term outcomes. But, you know, I definitely think it can be hard as workers when we're told, you know, or community is told over and over again, you know, if you need help, just put your hand up and ask for it. There's help out there. If you need support, if you need safety, all you have to do is ask. And then for that person who's coming and asking, and for the worker who's asking, it feels like, oh, but there is no support. It's actually not happening. There's nothing available to me in this moment. I have to send this woman back out into the street tonight to know that she may possibly be assaulted again. And how do I navigate that? And how am I able to reframe that and look at what we may be able to do going forward outside of this crisis moment? And it's difficult. And I just want to acknowledge that is difficult as well.
I think some of my thoughts around this question were, again, just around needing to support our clients to roll with, I guess, some of those automatic negative responses that they might have when they do hear no, from our attempts to try and connect them with a service partner in that moment, and help them to sort of see that they might have just this sort of, one idea about what it is that they need right now in that moment, but getting them to identify that there are other things that could be helpful and supportive for them in addition to, or if not that one thing that you want right now, that there can be other things that we can do in the meantime. So just supporting them to be able to think outside of that box a little bit, because it can be the way sometimes that, if we've got a client in crisis, that they see, it might be hard for them to see sort of, other options and other ideas, so we can support them in that way. Yeah.
Sorry, there's a mute button. So this actually brings us to our final question for our section. So the question is, when you know a client is unsafe and you feel like you haven't been able to help, as a professional and as a person, how does this impact you?
I'm going to throw my hand up here, because I would be lying if I said it didn't. It definitely has an impact. I mean, we're human for a start. We all, we have feelings, we have emotions as clinicians. And you know, we're often in these roles because we like to help people. We like to, you know, help them change and grow and have improvements in their quality of life and their well-being. So yeah, I think, you know, as something I said earlier in the piece was remaining hopeful and modeling that hopefulness for them, and so hopefully that they can sort of draw on your, you know, own hopefulness and pick up on a bit of that themselves, and seeing the alternative options and supports and services and people that are out there. And also, you know, just laying that foundation of trust as well, that, you know, yeah, even though we don't have the answer right now, you know, we're still going to be here for you. And yeah, I think that's how I sort of get through it. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's certainly difficult, and we need to, you know, we all need to be honest that it is hard to go home at the end of the day sometimes, knowing that you haven't been able to provide or assist in getting that immediate safety or that immediate solution. But I think for me, it's taking a moment to acknowledge what we were able to achieve in that time. You know, what we could offer, how we offered it, the way we engaged, the sense of connection we were able to give that person, being able to look at their resilience and how they've managed these situations before and get some reassurance from that as well. I think all of those things kind of helped me go home at night and be able to come back the next day.
That's really similar for me as well. I think that, you know, we're taught a lot and we're told a lot about, you know, have a self-care plan, you know, take time, do all those kinds of things. And they all have a really good place, but there's no walk on the beach that can get you out of a worker having to try and navigate a system where there's gaps all over the place and it's geared against those who need the services the most. So for me, one thing is around being my own strong advocate within, you know, my workplace and my community around my self-care and my boundaries. So all those things are important, but I also think it's important, what helps me is to compartmentalize what's happened. So if I can sit back and reflect on a circumstance and work through, did I do everything I could? Did I treat this person with kindness? Did I explore all the avenues I could think of at the time? It might not have been perfect, but, you know, I think, you know, what you were saying before, was I authentic and transparent in my dealings? That's the stuff that's important to me. And then I channel my energy for the other stuff into the system. So I think as in this work, it's really important to remain engaged with that advocacy side of things, to where we can, out of the heat of the moment on the Friday afternoon, you know, raise the client's voice through advocacy, if they give permission, to kind of highlight where there are service gaps, and to be their voice if they can't, because they've got to deal with the hard reality of what they're going through. But I carry, I think, in some of the work that I tried to do, those voices and stories with me in other forums. So if we have opportunities to talk to DCJ or our peak bodies about funding, or get involved in local committees that are kind of coming together, I don't talk about those stories, you know, specifically, but they stay with me and they drive me. So finding somewhere else to put that stuff where you feel like you can make a difference, but also knowing that you don't have to. We can't be wholly and solely responsible. But I'm a big believer around hopefulness, and I have seen it, and I try to let people know that brighter days will come, and we've got to believe that, and we've got to help the client believe that there will be brighter days. It's not today, but brighter days will come, and if we can help maintain that with them, and walk with them towards that, I think that's one of the ways that I get through some of those harder days. Well, that's the end of our discussion today. Did you have any final thoughts that you wanted to share with the audience?
I don't think so. I wanted to acknowledge that everybody that's working in this sector and in this space doing great work and is doing the best they can and is making a difference for people. Like, I really believe that, and I see it all the time, and the improvements in people and their self-confidence grows in people and their sense of self grows just by engaging, you know, with the broader community and with all of us as workers. And I think, yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge that you're all doing good work.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for inviting me to be, participate in this discussion. I think what the interagency meetings are doing across the state are really valuable. And I hope that, this has been helpful for other workers in this area to hear, I guess, our thoughts and our experiences, and to, hear maybe some similarities of what it's like to, even though we're all working in different agencies or different areas as different, as different professionals, that we all do have a very similar experience, and that I think some of the points we raised today are really valuable, and hopefully it can help others just, by participating. Yeah.
Lovely. Yeah, I think my final thoughts are similar to that. It's to thank you for investing your time to come to the DFE forum, for one. I know I'm constantly amazed by the work I see happening in community, and it's so lovely from Warrina's perspective, where sometimes it almost feels like we have an extension of our own team within community. So it really that makes a difference, that we can all come together and work towards common goals and share values. So a big thank you to the people on the online and in the audience, because if you're here and you're invested in this type of training, it means you're doing that you're invested in the right issues, and we're all on the same page, and we will get there.
Thank you.